Welcome to sqadia.com. Today our lecture topic is the spinal cord and we are in the section 2 of the spinal cord, that is the spinal nerves. In this section we will be going through the anatomy of the roots of the spinal nerve. What are the sensory fiber, what are the motor fibers, how many there are, the descending and ascending tracts are formed in the spinal cord, what is a ganglion, what is the role of parasympathetic and sympathetic chain in the spinal cord. There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves which leave the spinal cord and pass through the intervertebral foramina in the vertebral column. Each spinal nerve is connected to the spinal cord by two roots, the anterior root and the posterior root. The anterior root consists of bundles of nerve fiber carrying the nerve impulses away from the central nervous system, and these nerve fibers are called as efferent nerve fibers. The posterior root consists of bundles of nerve fiber which are carrying the nerve impulses towards the central nervous system, and these are called as afferent fibers. Now remember, we've just discussed that there are 7 cervical vertebrae, then there are 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, and 5 sacral, and 4 coccygeal. But actually the nerves are not arranged like this. Spinal cord ends at L1. So the cervical spinal nerves, there are 7 cervical spinal vertebrae, but there are from C1 to C8, there are 8 spinal cervical nerves. So there's not exactly the same as compared to the vertebra number. This is the diagram which is actually showing the ascending and descending tracts. This is all those tracts which are actually descending from the central nervous system, that is from the brain, from forebrain to the midbrain, then eventually descending into the hindbrains, and then there's the decussation of the pyramids at the level of the pyramid, then this decussation, and then eventually they descend down into the spinal cord. Now if you see this is the gray matter of the spinal cord, this is the white matter. The gray matter actually of the spinal cord is central position and it contains the nuclei of these fibers. Here there is actually these fibers terminate on these nuclei, and eventually then from there onward new fibers are arise, and then they come out from over here. As you can appreciate, this is the classical sensory tract. This is called as posterior column, as it is arranged more posteriorly and in the white column. While if you appreciate over here, the motor fibers are more so arranged on the anterior aspect of this rather than the posterior aspect. Similarly, sensory major dorsal column tract is also called dorsal column because it is actually the posterior aspect. And they form the major sensory part, while some others blue sensory, as for example, anterolateral system is formed by spinothalamic and anterior spinothalamic tract. These are also which carry out the pain and temperature sensation, all present anteriorly, but they carry the sensation from the spinal cord towards the brain, towards the central nervous system. So to appreciate what are the major motor tracts would always be descending tracts, because all those tracts which are coming through the brain and to the effector organs would be descending tracts and would be motor. They are mainly divided into 2 types, the pyramidal and extrapyramidal. Why they are called the pyramidal tracts? Because there is the decussation of pyramids. In the hindbrain, at the level of the pyramids, actually these fibers decussate towards the opposite. When I say decussate, actually means the right is going towards the left is going towards the right. So what actually happens is the pyramidal tract includes the lateral corticospinal tract and anterior corticospinal tract. So it is mainly the corticospinal tract. If you appreciate over here, there is cervical are arranged more towards the center, and as this sacral fibers, those who are actually going to out of the would be supplying the muscles of the sacral region, are actually more centered out towards outer edge of the spinal cord. Now this has actually a significance. In case of an anterior cord syndrome, for example, if anterior cord which is affecting this area only, these cervical fibers of the corticospinal tract are actually affected more. As a result, anterior cord or central cord syndromes actually affect the upper limbs more rather than the lower limbs. Why? Because the cervical fibers are actually arranged more towards the center than compared to the sacral side. If you see the other extrapyramidal tracts, these are those tracts which are not actually the mainly primary motor tracts, but actually also are from the descending tracts. They are coming from different areas rather than from the motor cortex. These are the rubrospinal, which is actually coming from reticulospinal, olivospinal through the olivary nuclei which are present in the pons, vestibulospinal through the vestibular nuclei which are present in the hindbrain, that is mainly in the pons and the medulla oblongata. Now these tracks actually come down and they all also descend over in the mainly over the this area. As you can appreciate over it, this is bilateral. Now coming to the sensory, these are the ascending tracks. These are the tracks which are going upward. There is taking the sensation. Mainly there are two tracks. There is a dorsal column track and spinal thalamic track. Now mainly they form two systems. Dorsal column, that is the posterior system, and anterolateral system. Why? Because if they are arranged posteriorly, that is they're called the dorsal column or posterior column, while those were arranged on anterior lateral aspect, as this is the anterior side and this is the lateral side, they form the lateral spinal thalamic and anterior spinal thalamic tract. They're coming to why now. If you see, appreciate over here, look at the cervical fibers and look at the sacral fibers. In dorsal column, actually, as the nerves are joining in, they are lying on the in the inside. So the sacral fibers actually enter the cord from the lower side. So when at the level of cervical level, when the cord is at this level, if you see them, because the cervical fibers are coming from arms and upper limbs and actually taking sensations from over the area, so that they are lying on the outside, while those fibers which are bringing sensation for the lower limbs, that is the sacral region as well, they are lying on the inside, as you can appreciate over here. So where does the spinal fibers go? These fibers are concerned with conveying information to the central nervous system. They are called the sensory fibers. So your all dorsal column tract, lateral spinal thalamic tract, anterior spinal thalamic tract, and all these are actually the sensory fibers. They are bringing in sensations from different organs, are actually conveying it to the central nervous system. The cell bodies of these nerve fibers are situated in the swelling and the posterior root called the posterior root ganglion. I will be explaining to you in the next upcoming slides actually. Now this is the probably slide which is showing in, as you can appreciate over here. Now this is another type of a diagram. This is the posterior aspect, this is the anterior aspect, this is the anterior lateral. The fibers lying over here would be anterior lateral, here would be the dorsal column tract, and there would be the major motor fibers, the pyramidal tract would be lying. As you can appreciate, this is the red line showing a descending tract, a motor tract. It comes down as it is lying over here, and it binds, or it's actually synapses over here in a nucleus of another cell. Why this is called gray matter? Because it contains all the cell. From here onward, one fiber is going like this, but all those sensory stimuli which is coming to this is being actually coming from the periphery, and the peripheral spinal nerves nuclei are not lying inside the spinal cord, rather in and outside the spinal cord, forming a dorsal root of posterior root ganglion, in which actually these nuclei of these spinal nerves accumulate to form a swelling which is lying just outside of the main spinal cord, called as dorsal root ganglion, which can be appreciated over here. These fibers are concerned with conveying information to the central nervous system. The cell bodies of these nerve fibers are situated in swelling called as the posterior root ganglion, as I've just explained it to you. Now, coming in this section, we have covered what is the structure of a spinal cord, what are the ascending tracts, what are the main descending tracts, why they are called ascending and descending tracts. The ascending tracts are actually bringing in the information towards the central nervous system. Descending tracts are bringing the information from the central nervous system towards the effector organ. What is a posterior root ganglion? How these actually the fibers are arranged in the posterior root will form a swelling called as posterior root ganglion. Similarly, we have just discussed what is the significance of the arrangement of these fibers, why the motor fibers in which the cervical are arranged more centrally, while in case of the sensory fibers, the sacral are arranged more centrally. For more on this topic, keep watching sqadia.com. Thank you.